You're in the right place at the right time, stretching from the distant spaceports of Batu, Tatooine, and Korriban, and all the way to the bright center of the galaxy at Imperial Center, slamming into your holo projector like a supercharged nanoparticle of coaxium. This is the Star Wars Unfiltered podcast, and we're here to bring you your needed dose of Star Wars commentary on June 25th, 2024. And we have a lot of fun topics today. We'll be basically covering the first half of Star Wars The Acolyte from Disney Plus. And how was your week, Jason? Or should I say the last 6 months since the last podcast?
They've been good. I played through Jedi Fallen Order, which was really good. And then I'm currently playing Alien Isolation. Finally, after I think it's been out for 10 years, and I finally got around to playing it.
I have a copy of that I picked up used somewhere, and I haven't even loaded it. And that was like
you got to do it.
5 years ago. Well, the game gives me the heebie-jeebies every time I see clips from it.
Yes, but it's not as spooky as I was expecting.
Okay,
but that's not a bad thing.
Right.
It's not a bad thing.
Yeah. So then I should play it with the lights off with headphones.
I don't know. I still have trouble doing that. I still keep the lights on, and I have trouble playing with the headphones on late at night.
Yeah. There's something
really
about Giger's Alien and the sounds and everything that still disturb after decades.
Yeah. What you been up to?
Well, let's see. Last weekend, did some camping out of town at, technically it was the Valyurmo area. That was the nearest town. But it was a campground just near there, which is itself near Pear Blossom, which is kind of behind the San Bernardino Mountains, between, say, Palmdale and Victorville. So it's an area of California you don't see very often because you never have to take the roads between Victorville and Santa Clarita. There's no need unless you're like visiting specifically something out there. It's not like on the way out of the state or anything. But it was very nice. It was a great little creek area and had a lot of fun. It was good to get outdoors, but I am covered in mosquito bites, still in recovery from that. Just barely. It's still bothering me. And I got so badly sunburned. Even with sunscreen, I was just obliterated, mostly on my arms and stuff. But yeah.
It sounds like the beginning of summer.
Yep. Summer is here. And as we've discovered these last few days, it's really hitting us. But otherwise, it's been fun times. And we've got... Oh, I was going to mention also, I've been playing Jedi Survivor. I beat the main story campaign a few months ago, and because this is what sparked you with Fallen Order too. It was like I was gonna revisit Fallen Order. You're gonna play both for the first time. I'm gonna play Survivor for the first time, and because I was just like ready to jump into Survivor. I really wanted to, like when it first came out. I think it was still 7 months since release before I played it, but I have to say, it's the greatest Star Wars game of all time.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, even over TIE Fighter, which to me is like my personal number one.
Ooh, that's a bold statement.
It is. It really is. But at the end of the day, there's something about having an open world Star Wars experience, even though there is a story and there is kind of nudges you in certain areas at certain times. Most of the main planet is open world, and it's so huge, and the map is way bigger than anything in Fallen Order. It's like you can literally play for hours and hours and hours, and you're only like scratching the surface.
Yeah.
And I'm doing a second playthrough now. I haven't played it for a few weeks, but I was on a second playthrough, and I'm still seeing things I didn't see the first time, like little dialogue bits and other little things, and it's just like, my goodness, this game is just like bursting at the seams.
Those little dialogue bits are neat, the amount that they have in there, because I remember when I was playing through Fallen Order, I mentioned one of the dialogue bits to you, and you hadn't heard it.
I didn't recognize it.
And you played that game twice.
Twice. Yeah.
And it was I think it was a Yaddle name drop.
That's right. That's
Um,
right.
but you never got that dialogue bit,
I
so
because that would stand out. I
right.
think that's why I was like, "What? I
Yeah,
don't
that's why it
remember
stood out
that."
to
But
me. So
right, Yaddle doesn't get mentioned very often. Um, anyway, let's jump into what our thoughts on the first half of the Acolyte. Um, as of this recording, the fifth episode is airing later tonight, so we wanted to kind of cover the first half of the show and also offer some possible theories for the plot going forward. Obviously, this is spoilers, but what have you thought so far?
it's not as bad as social media would have you believe, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but it's not as okay. It's not as bad as Kenobi in a lot of ways,
No,
but it's not
no.
as good as Andor. So
It's
it's
certainly not. It's what is really.
it's serviceable. Actually, I saw somebody describe it, and this really it struck me because I think it's true, which also colors my opinion on it, but also colors my predictions too.
Mhm.
It'll color my predictions,
Yeah,
but they described it as it's a young adult mystery show.
that's a fair assessment.
So it made me think back to like the difference between, and not that it was like high literature or anything, but the Bantam Del Rey
Yeah,
novels, the
or
adult
even
novels
young Jedi Knights for
versus
slightly.
versus the adult quote unquote adult novels versus the Young Jedi Knight books,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So that sort of softened, because I could see that, right?
Mm-hmm.
In
Absolutely.
the casting and the everything, I could see it
Yes.
being a more young adult angle. So
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's okay. I continue to be intrigued, and there's nothing that has made me. Maybe I'm just beaten down by everything.
Yeah.
Maybe Kenobi broke me, but
I give up.
um, there's nothing where I'm like, okay, this is you know
Lows.
this is horse shit.
Because I had that problem with Kenobi where I was watching and I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, I mean, it happened every so often. It got worse, obviously, on revisitations of that series.
Yes.
But yeah, my thought on the Acolyte is more or less what you said, and it it has the quote unquote cheapness of Obi-Wan and the Book of Boba
Hmm.
Fett with the the sets and everything. It's very there's not a lot of huge expansive location shooting that like the kind that Andor has had.
Hmm.
Nor would I expect that because that's the kind of thing that blew up these budgets for so many of these things for not just Disney but other studios in recent years. They were spending a lot of money on things that weren't always paying off. And I think the new thing going forward is to they all got to be a Roger Corman kind of about it a little bit, like start making things, a little smaller scale. And I think this show because it's the story is the most intriguing part, like because they have it on the timeline 100 years before the movies, they can afford to focus completely on the story. We don't need to worry about, oh, this character is going to end up here, this is going to happen, this is setting up this.
Although they did kind of step in it with Kia di Mundi.
Yes,
I think there
he
was,
popped up.
yes,
Yeah,
and I
which
think
I didn't know at the time. I
right,
just thought, oh, that's a Syrian Jedi because I looked at the casting. It's
yeah,
not Silas Carson who played him in the
right,
prequels. That's what threw me off.
right.
And
Well,
I know it's a younger Kiadi,
it's
but
funny when I saw it when it popped up, I didn't even think to like look anywhere else. I just turned on. Actually, no, I did look somewhere else because I did turn on the subtitles, the closed
oh,
captioning.
okay, yeah,
It
yeah.
didn't have his name. It didn't
That's the thing.
specify.
Keep subtitles on
Hmm.
because I like to eat chips. No, not just that because I'm old, but
Oh, I wear headphones because I eat chips.
oh, there you
If
go.
I try to watch without headphones, I can't hear
Yes.
over the
Yeah, yeah.
chips.
Crunching. But no, yeah, you're right. It didn't say in the subtitles.
Yes,
So that's usually the key thing that helps me pick up stuff.
I think I looked in the credits, and I think I think that's where I saw it was in the credits.
Yeah, yeah.
And but they kind of stepped in it with him. Not that any like prime canon sources had specified his age, I guess, but then there was like people that got really bent out of shape about them basically changing how old he is.
Okay,
Um,
so okay, let me preface another thing here. This is the first Star Wars series I'm avoiding with social media
mhm.
and like YouTube stuff,
Yeah,
positive and negative. I've occasionally seen headlines though, because
yeah,
obviously I follow Star Wars Explained, and one of the videos was like it was a Q&A video, but it was like, so what's going on with Kiadi Mundi? And I was like, and I'm thinking to myself, what is going on? Because I don't know. And I mean, yeah, there's a younger Kiadi, but like, what possible problem could people have? I'm trying to like, and okay, an age thing. Maybe they said he was a certain age, and then now they're changing it. But Kiadi has had problems that go back to the prequels. Like, remember the scene like when Anakin's like, to be on the council, you have to be a master,
right.
and Kiadi, I can't remember his status during Revenge of the Sith. Maybe he was a master by then. But in the Phantom Menace, it was specifically said in the comics and all these other sources he
Yeah,
was like the only Jedi Knight on the council. So it's like Anakin doesn't know his Jedi Council history. Is that
right,
it? Which is possible, I guess, but he talks to Kiadi every so often in
right, right.
different stories. So it's like it's just okay. And then on the other hand, okay, so is this what people have to make YouTube videos about now? I mean, you could criticize so many things, but now it's like, oh my God, Kiadi Mundi is the wrong age.
Right. Well, that's the
And it's
thing.
kind
It's
of like,
like I'm like, people got really bad out of shape. They're like sending death threats,
oh,
supposedly,
I'm
supposedly.
sure. I'm
I don't
sure
know.
they did.
I don't know if most of the time I don't even know if that's really true. Are people really sending death threats? Maybe they are,
If it's the
but
people that are camping on college grounds in tents right now for other things, it could very well be death threats.
possibly.
You never know.
Um, but he, I when I saw it, I have never I never knew. I knew Kiadi Moody or Kiadi Moody, however anybody wants to say it. Um, I knew he was like kind of old or whatever, but I never really gave two thoughts about
Anytime
specifically
I
how old
see,
he is.
yeah,
I had more of an issue with him being involved in the discussion about this mysterious Force user
right.
because of his comments about the Sith being extinct for a millennia. So like he has a
Yes.
strong opinion that the Sith have been gone for 1,000 years. Like he's
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
staunch. He says it
We'll
like that's
need
primary canon. His opinion on
we'll
it,
need to see how that plays out
right?
in regards to Kiadi.
Which
I
which
mean that
plays into my theories about the next 4
the next
episodes.
few episodes.
Yeah,
We need to see how this plays out, and I mean this is a larger topic as a whole, where we need to see where this plays out, because there's a lot of things we could comment on and be like, wait a second, but then you might all come together near
yeah.
the end, and or not. But that's for us
It's
to
just
find out.
it's just weird because they never say Sith in the scene that he's in. They
Yes.
still I don't think they've said Sith at all yet. So
No.
there is
No.
plausible deniability about like, well, he never says it, so it's never crosses his mind or whatever. But then it's like, but why is he there? Why him? Why is
It.
he
Yeah.
there
It.
in that he says that? So that might have some bearing,
Yes. It
possibly.
might.
Could be a red herring, part of a red herring.
This is one of those things where I kind of see this and I'm like, well, I'm not even going to bother speculating what the answer might be, because one way or the other, it'll either make sense or not, and I'll just find out.
Right.
So
Yeah. I mean,
I don't even
yeah,
like waste the brain power.
it's either an interesting red herring, or it's something interesting, or it's incredibly lazy and
Lazy. Yeah.
another instance of lazy writing slash whatever, just like Kenobi.
It could be. It could be. However, I have to say, just on the plotting and the way the plot threads move on this show, it's actually very well written. It's not and/or well written, I have to say, but there's nothing particularly awkward or bad. I mean, people have nitpicked, I think, a couple things here and there, but like from what I heard or saw, like on YouTube headlines before I
Hmm.
clicked, I don't want to see this channel. It just seems like, you know, it's decently written. I mean, it is a mystery, so it's unraveling like one. And we already have one flashback episode, which was the third one,
Mm-hmm.
and that explained some things. Obviously, it left mysteries for others, but yeah, I think like we were saying earlier, you have to look at this like it's a novel. I mean, yes, it's dealing with larger Star Wars connections, possibly with the Sith and the Jedi and things like that. But with its tone and its style, you almost have to just think like this is just like another Bantam novel back in the day, and it's just a bonus. It's just a little extra to get some insight to
Well,
things during
yeah.
that time period.
Depending on whatever the big, pull was that Leslie Headland teased.
Yeah,
Depending.
she said she was a big fan of the books growing up, and that she specifically requested something from the expanded universe. That's all she said,
Yeah. So
and it's left up to us. Does that mean Darth Tenebris, or I don't really consider Plagueis an EU character because he started with George, but
yeah, and
you
he's
know,
mentioned. He's mentioned.
yeah, he's
in
mentioned in the
Prime
movies.
Canon. So
But Tenebris, if and it's looking iffy at this point. I mean, I just don't with the dark sider and these other characters. That doesn't seem so far to be any connection to the Sith we knew from Legends. But when I think of wanted this pulled from the EU, I mean, Darth Tenebris popped into my head right away because in the Legends timeline, he is basically working with Plagueis during this time period on the timeline. So it's just hard to say. It's one of those things,
We'll see.
We'll see. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, my only issues was the Ki-Adi Mundi thing, and then the whole witches thing is kind of, there's interesting aspects to it, but then and I, like I said, I continue to be intrigued, especially like these sort of non-Jedi Force using sex.
Yeah.
They've got their own theories about the Force, all that stuff. That's always been interesting.
That's always been a book thing,
right? It reminds me of the what they called it, the current, that group in
the white current,
the white current in the Black Fleet Crisis.
Yes,
that was always interesting to me.
Yeah. Or even just the Night Sisters of Dathomir, which are so canonized now, it's hard to even imagine their old legends, like roots in the novels and stuff.
So like this group seemingly maybe is an offshoot of the witches. Maybe
could be. It could be.
They all seem to have a preference for the
munching
ladies.
Carpet.
Ladies.
Okay. You said it the nice way.
The delicate way. Which, is interesting. But the whole singing thing was kind of cringe and stuff. So,
yeah, I mean,
it wasn't actually cringe until the soundtrack started singing it too, because they were singing it and then the soundtrack sang it too, and it's like, it's kind of like when the Boba Fett theme like turned into it's saying Boba Fett.
Boba,
like,
Boba. Well, I'll tell you what. There's strange soundtrack things that go all the way back to Ewok saying "yub yub" with the Rebel Alliance.
Yeah,
and even in Shadows of the Empire, there's Dawerda Verda, which is the choral language thing that's written into the music that Ben Burt created. So yeah, there's little strange things like that. Sometimes it's weird because that breaks the fourth wall in a way, because like it's kind of meta how the words that they're singing, and it's like connected to things. We're listening to the soundtrack outside of the universe. It's just kind of weird.
But even all of that, even the fact that they're all seemingly lesbian or whatever, it doesn't, none of that actually bothers me. The only thing that bothers me around all that is the whole thing with May and Osha and how they're created. They're kind of vague and coy about it.
Are they a dyad?
Are they a dyad? Is it a virgin?
What does that mean? Yes.
Is it going to step on the toes of the whole prophecy and Anakin and all that stuff. Because there's already like, you know, in the movies, uh, Palpatine kind of implies, but I think in mostly a manipulating way, that maybe he doesn't imply is even too strong of a word, but he sort of very vaguely implies that him and Plagueis, or Plagueis by himself, whatever, uh, may have created Anakin.
Yeah.
Um, and I think people have ran with that a little too much, where I think it's mostly just Palpatine making shit up.
Yes, it
Um,
was more specific in one of the early scripts for Revenge of the Sith. So
yeah.
it came from George that he was actually intending with this early script, he was intending to have a reveal that Palpatine was Anakin's father, quote unquote,
Mm-hmm.
like through the Force,
Yeah.
and he trimmed that out of the Plagueis conversation,
Right.
it might have been later in the
But
movie, but
even
either way,
if
yeah,
it was in the conversation, even if it was in the script, I would still kind of take it as a lie, you know.
yes, that's the convenient thing he can do when writing about Palpatine and the Sith is like, well, maybe he said it to manipulate Anakin. And that's fun because then it lets the fans speculate endlessly about if it's true
Right.
or not. I mean, even going back to Vader, I'm your father, there was that large segment of fans that didn't believe it until
Mm-hmm.
Return of the Jedi confirmed it. So
Right.
it's fun to think of these things. And actually, that's the fun thing about the show, it being a mystery. We're getting these little tidbits week by week, and we're no longer talking around the water cooler about one show these days because
Yeah.
everyone's watching a million shows, but we're having our online water cooler discussions, and that's
Yeah.
fun. It's like the
Um.
old days.
So that's kind of my only complaint, and then the fat Padawan too. But
Oh,
that's whatever.
yeah. Yeah, that's whatever. I mean, let's just say he's thick boned. He's from a planet with high gravity. There's so many
I
ways you
think
could.
he's from the McDonald's planet.
That's where I'll end up uh, with my hover rascal. Yeah, it's little teeny tiny things like that. They look. I'll tell you what; those bother me like seeing an M16 in Andor. It's there for a half a second. I make a mental note. Oh, that's weird, and then I don't even dwell on it after that. I mean, sometimes there's things that can bother me a little longer, but so far, again, like kind of all the hubbub before this series. I mean, going back mostly the last year, but even before then, just based on Leslie Headland. And I mean, we're guilty of this too. Like, oh, she looks a certain way. There's going to be some kind of agenda stuff meshed into the show somehow. It's fine to be skeptical, but I was like,
Well, I mean, there is.
I'm well, there is here and there, but
The
it's
whole,
not
all the
like,
witches are lesbian.
well, but I don't really consider that necessarily an agenda thing. I mean,
Well,
was Dave Wolverton having an agenda with the Night Witches, or like the Haypans and that whole society of women? I mean,
it's that
you can,
it's that joke, right? Tonight's episode is the writer's disguised, fetish or whatever.
yeah, you're right.
Well,
There's things like that.
let me say though, I 100% believe there is an agenda, and there's like wish fulfillment and all that stuff in the writing and the witches and them creating the daughters on their own with no men and all that stuff. But at the same time, that's fine. It's not bothering me yet because
Well,
it hasn't been revealed to be like really poorly written or like just
yeah, that's the thing. If it's written well, even if someone has an agenda or not or whatever, if it's framed and presented in a decent, well-written way,
yeah.
in a believable within the Star Wars universe way, as other stories have been with female societies, then I think it's fine.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal. It's the same thing too with how there's no white men other than those two criminals in like the first episode or whatever. But it's like, well, I
Well,
like all the other
and
characters,
Torben, right? You know,
and Torben. If you,
but you know what? It just
yeah,
occurred to me because I off of this stuff, we talked about his beard a little bit, right? His beard
yeah,
looked kind of cheap and stuff. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me
hmm.
of that episode of Beavis and Butthead when they cut their hair and glue it to their face to make it
Yeah,
look like they have
yeah,
beards. That's what
yeah,
it reminds me of.
yes. Torben did look. I was telling you when we saw it, he looked elfin.
Yes.
It looked like a young person who they aged up somehow,
Well, I
and
mean, that's what they
I
did.
that's what they did. But I don't think I need to look at that actor's age. But I know he's in his 20s now. He's got to be. But like I was used to seeing him as a teenager in Game of Thrones, and if it was back then, I would understand. But yeah, obviously with flashbacks and everything, he's more closer to his real life age in the flashback scene. Um, but what I was gonna say, going back to the
He is 26.
26, okay,
Yeah.
that's about what I was thinking. Thinking early mid 20s.
Yeah.
Um, I was gonna say you just have to approach this show just kind of like oh, I forgot what I was gonna say. Whatever. I just think the overall complaints that were I was aware of leading up to the release, this is what made me think. I mean, I have a problem with social media and the internet and clickbait as it is, and that's why I unplugged from social media, or at least Facebook, as of February. And but it's also YouTube and this kind of what do you call it? It's like hate clicking, or hate algorithm
And well,
kind of
it's fed by hate
vortex.
watchers. There's hate
Hate
watchers.
watchers. So, and again, oftentimes I can agree with that stuff, and I might even agree with a lot of it with the Acolyte when all is said and done and the show is over, and I can. But I want to assess it on its own, and with what I was getting at is by unplugging from most social media and not watching any reviews of this episode by episode. I'm trying to kind of mentally not just accept this for what it is, as I'm watching it, aside from talking to you, but also kind of as a throwback to how I absorbed media, even just in the 2000s and
Yeah.
2010s, where I was
Pre-social
not
media.
pre-social media, where I wasn't getting online, and other than maybe a forum here and there, I wasn't getting assaulted on my senses from constant headlines saying this sucks. Here's just a bunch of garbage, just vying for my clicks and my attention. And because it's really gotten to the point now, I mean, this is a whole larger issue I'm not going to go into, but like I just feel like that's so draining now. And even if I agree with it, I'm tired of it. I'm just tired. I want to go back to how it felt. I would love to go back to the 90s where I just bought stuff. I liked it. Even if I didn't like it a ton, I enjoyed it on some level. The Trioculus books, Crystal Star, Planet of Twilight. They weren't
Yeah.
the greatest things, but I just moved on. There was something else right after I finished a video game, another comic, a story, whatever, and you just move on. And I think people just need a little bit of perspective that it's okay to not like something, but don't have it be your entire focus. Like it's literally like the dark side. It pulls you in. It's enticing, and that feeling like, oh, I'm getting, everything I already think is being confirmed by what this video is telling me.
Yeah.
That's the whole echo chamber thing, and
Yeah.
it's very powerful because whether you agree with it or not, it's going to color your perception. If there's little hints of truth in there, and a lot of times there is. So anyway, I just had to get that off my chest. It's just something that's, I just want to absorb this as it is, and then when all is said and done and the last episode airs, then I will be like, okay, here's where it failed, here's where it was good,
Right. And
and I can really
that's
do
what
it.
I want to do. That's why I haven't like sat. I mean, I don't want to focus on all the bad stuff, especially if it isn't as bad in the light of whatever is to come, right? Like,
Yeah,
the whole thing with the witches, a lot of people making fun of the fact that they're um, all seemingly lesbian and stuff, and it's a totally female society and stuff.
yeah,
But like I said, so far it's not a problem, and certainly it might not be by the end of the show. It might continue to not be, or it could
yeah.
be. It could really just be a really forced agenda thing, and it's shitty, and I'll rip into it. But right now, I don't want to do that because I don't want to like you don't want to get into the mindset of like, oh, I'm going to hate this. So like I have to find all the
that's
things.
where
I have to feed it, I have to keep throwing coal in the
that was
fire.
my personal concern in reading things several months ago about the show. Was that it was making me, I was really looking forward to it, and then I was noticing that these things that were possibilities with it were making me less interested. And it's like, that's not a good feeling. Whether it's true or not, I'd rather, I want to go into things level headed. I don't want to hype myself up too much, but like, I just want to, again, I just want to be excited for new Star Wars. As vague as that statement can be, I just want to be excited for new Star Wars. Whether that can be accomplished, honestly, for me, it's pretty easily accomplished.
Right.
But I'm basically mental.
Well, let me ask you this. Are you excited for new Willow content?
No, I am not, because Willow failed me with its single content. It failed so bad. It was like a baseball player who hadn't played in decades getting up to the plate and then completely striking out, and it's like, get the fuck out of my sight. Now go die. Shoot
there is a
yourself in the
distinction.
head.
There is a distinction, and clearly Star Wars is not there yet.
I think, but it's like what we said about Willow. If it had more chances at bat, more chances, it might not have been quite as bad as it was, because just one spectacular failure doesn't mean that like 10 other tries couldn't have hit home in some way.
That was a really painful 40-year wait for what we got.
Yeah, it was extremely painful.
Anyway, so at least halfway through, the series is pretty good. There's some cringy stuff. There's some lore stuff that hopefully will make more sense, depending on how things go. Hopefully I haven't stepped in, a pile of crap with Ki-Adi-Mundi.
Well, hey, when I saw the rodent creature, I kept saying, "Is that a tenon? Is that a tenon?" I was right. It was.
Yeah, that was the big lore pull for you. There you go. That was just for you.
If that was it, I feel really, really pathetic right now. But that's actually a really cool poll, because we have never seen a tenon in live action, and they very, very rarely get used anymore as far as even comics and novels and such. Yeah. So that's a nice little Brian Daly reference from Spray from the old Han Solo's Revenge. But anyway, I had to mention that because that was very fun. And I just think, for me so far, the Acolyte is hovering above Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan, and below Andor and Mandalorian for me. It's just right in the middle.
For me, it's right at Book of Boba Fett, because I feel like Book of Boba Fett, that it had problems, but there was some good stuff and
really, really good fun battles and stuff.
It's right there. It could slip, or it could move the needle up. So we'll see.
We will see.
So let's talk about predictions, though, because that's, I think that's more interesting to discuss.
Sure.
As far as what we think is going to happen. Now, I think that depending on how crazy they want to get with the writing, and so far, it's trending toward simplistic mystery in a young adult sense. But and I know in interviews they've used the word Sith, but looking at the Master and how he's presented in that last episode, I don't think he's a Sith. We talked about this a little bit.
His outfit looks Kylo Ren-ish.
Yes, I think the Sith thing, they haven't said in the show, but in interviews and stuff. And the thing is they can't say it's explicitly not Sith, because then it's like, then people go,
then
like, okay, what
else
could
am I
be?
watching the show?
Well, then it could be like, well, what could it be? And then people would just figure it out, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that I think it's very possible that he's a Knight of Ren. He could be Ren, right? Because I was looking at the lore behind the Knights of Ren and how the name Ren was taken the quote unquote original Ren wasn't actually the original Ren. He took the lightsaber from the original Ren, and he's like kind of an unknown person or whatever.
This reminds me of Mandalore in the old Tales of the Jedi comics. Mandalore was a person,
Yeah,
and so if you killed Mandalore and you took his mask, that next person became Mandalore.
right. And that could be the inspiration for it.
You never know.
So I think he's a Knight of Ren. He could be Ren, right? Ren sort of is I would say it's an Asian type name, right? And
Or Hispanic, if Stimpy's around somewhere. You idiot!
how could I forget about Stimpy, Ren and
But
Stimpy?
Ren.
I, for,
Right.
I
But
totally forgot
Ren.
about that. Well, thinking about the name Ren, Ren and Stimpy notwithstanding,
Yeah.
it comes off as sort of an Asian name or like an
Yeah,
Asian
yeah,
flavor name, and so
yeah.
and then the actor who's playing, presumably the master, they have. I mean, it's not been spelled out, but it's
The
pretty
fan
obvious.
speculation seems to be that the Asian guy, what's the character's name? Almost seems like it had a Q in it. They've only said it once or twice on the show. It's very fleeting,
Kin or
but
something.
I'll look it up.
Yeah. Anyway, I feel like it could be red, right? And then that sort of diffuses the whole issue of like Kia di Mundi.
Yeah,
It diffuses the issue. Again, they didn't say Sith in front of them, so they didn't jump to that conclusion. They just kind of implied like, red lightsaber, ooh, the spooky. Um, it diffuses that. It diffuses, the issue of whether people want or it is Darth Tenebris or Plagueis or, the line of the Sith and the rule of two and all that stuff. Because
Keemer.
Keemer,
Qimir. Keemer. Okay.
Keemer Ren. Does that
There you
roll
go.
off the tongue?
Yeah, sure.
Um. Anyway, so and the actor Manuel Jacinto. So he's not even. Well, I mean, he's Filipino. Oh,
Okay.
Filipino Chinese descent. Okay, so
Well, yeah.
so
there,
that's
there you
Asian.
go. That
Yeah, so
explains
he's
the name,
Asian.
Manuel.
Right. Well, you got to be careful. You don't know. He's Canadian, but he was born
Yeah,
in the. But he
who
was
knows with
born
anyone
in
anymore?
the Philippines, and he's of Filipino Chinese descent. So,
yeah.
truly a melting pot.
Yes.
Anyway, so he's seemingly of Asian descent in his look in the show. Ren, to me, comes off as sort of an Asian name. So I could see they might go that route.
It could.
That's my
Yeah,
point.
very well
That's my
could.
point.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my prediction is they're not Sith. It removes the issue. Because the other thing is, like, if they think it's Sith and they figure out he's Sith, everybody that knows that needs to die. Or,
Or they hide it willingly.
right, yeah, they hide it because that's a really good
because
idea.
they're shameful. I mean, that's the main premise of this show as it's been going on. It's really almost the beginnings of how the Jedi fall during the prequel era. It's the cracks in their armor that Osha and May and these other characters are exposing, the hypocrisy of the Jedi. And actually, that's the main thing I love about this series is that, I mean, yeah, we have all new characters and we're not setting up events like with Anakin and Palpatine, but just as a whole, that theme of the beginning of the fall of the Jedi is very interesting to me. So
yeah,
I like that side of it. It's very cool.
but then there's a whole thing with like, because some of them know that, or did know, because some of them are dead, but they would know that Osha and May were created. There was no father, right? So like, when did the prophecy come about? Like, did they know about the prophecy? There's a lot of things with that.
And I'm purposely not rewatching any episodes. Oftentimes for other Star Wars series, I would do that before the series ends, just to refresh myself from the previous week. I'm not doing any of that. I'm watching them just once as they come out. and then when it's all done, I'm
Yeah.
going to go back and see have everything and how it
That's
connected.
that's probably what I'll do because even me saying that, I don't recall off the top of my head for certain who even knows that. I think Soul knows it. I don't know if anybody else knows it, at least as far as who's still alive, because um,
Yeah, yeah, because
Carrie-Anne Moss's
Kelnaka is dead.
Kelnaka's
Here,
dead. Carrie-Anne Moss's character's
I
dead.
think 3 out of the 4. I
Indara,
think,
that's her name.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
Torben, he's dead.
So
Killed himself.
right, which is weird. That's another weird thing. Like if they didn't,
That's how much shame, whatever they went through, like that really intrigued me because I'm like, what did they do?
well, and especially since he was a Padawan at the time too, so he wouldn't
Right,
have made decisions. So I don't know.
right.
It's really weird.
And then he goes into a 10-year meditative trance for
But
10
but
years.
there's no like, especially on Soul's part, there doesn't appear to be any like implied guilt. He doesn't.
Right, very true. Compared to the other ones and stuff, he seems he's almost like Qui-Gon in a way, in that I feel like he has his own style for
Right.
training and stuff.
Yeah.
But you're right.
Well, it
There
seems to
doesn't
get attached.
he does. He does. And that's the other thing I like, how he gets shamed even by his current Padawan, like, oh, why are you looking at her hollow? You're not supposed to be attached to, your past
Right.
student, blah blah blah. And I like that he has answers that he gives the answers they want to hear, basically.
Yeah.
But he doesn't deny his attachment. And
Right.
I think at the end of the series, when it comes to Soul, we're going to see him as kind of like Qui-Gon, like I said, where he did the right thing at the right time.
Yeah.
And that's why the Jedi fall. That's the whole thing, is how they became too detached
Mhm.
from the regular passions of the people, and then
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Um, it would be interesting if, because Torben's shown as being mind controlled basically, or some sort of influence from the
Mhm.
witches at one point. So I suppose it's possible that him or someone else, maybe him, was controlled and then killed everybody. Maybe somebody
Oh,
did
could
that.
be. Yeah.
Because
Could
I
be.
assume they did him because he was a
Oh,
Padawan, right?
and that would be why he in particular is so
Right.
guilt-ridden.
Yeah, the rest of them are like, I don't know, and
That's
and none of
that's a
them,
good theory.
all of them were knights and masters, so they wouldn't. Presumably, their mental fortitude would be
Yes.
strong enough
Yes.
to prevent that happening. But him,
Exactly.
he's shown as, being susceptible to that. So
That's a really good theory.
it also
Yeah.
made me wonder about, like, maybe the whole thing is a mind trick too, like the witches aren't actually dead. But then it's weird.
That would be
because-
very white current. That'd be very white current.
But that'd be
how
weird
the
because they like
illusions.
leave the girls hanging, like even
Yeah.
May.
Yeah.
Wait, May or Mai? I forget.
It's May.
May. Yeah. So they leave her hanging. I mean, somehow
Yeah.
somehow she survived the fall. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff. Again,
There's a lot of
that's
stuff.
why I remain intrigued, because there's a lot of stuff. It's like, oh, how did this happen?
Different
there's
things
interesting
to
things.
chew on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even if it's just implied in the show, it gets your brain working with ideas and theories, and that was a big reason I liked Lost, because it was JJ's mystery box thing. But that's the good thing about the mystery box; it really can get you to think about stuff.
Right.
That
It's just
you know.
you have to open and show what was in the mystery box. You can't just you just can't set the stuff up with no payoff, because that's bad writing, and that is
But-
that
right.
bit
But
JJ in
that's
the ass.
that's the intriguing thing, though, is that if that is done well, you bring your own intent into the show with your
Yeah.
theories and ideas, and it's like Luke going into the cave. What's in there? Only bring what you bring with you.
Right. Or, Total Recall, you could say that was a mystery box, and they never resolved it really at the end, but they resolved it enough to where you could apply.
There's enough clues where
Right.
you could piece it together. But what I
Or-
like is that even within those clues, there's clues going the other way too.
Right. Or like
How
the
it's
thing.
like,
The thing is the same thing. There's no resolution
Yeah.
as to whether or not Childs, or even McCready for that matter.
there's no glint in his eyes.
Right. Which Childs was a thing, but that's we won't get into that. There are
Thing
clues.
Theories podcast.
There are clues.
Yes.
He was a thing. But
Yes.
but so they could do that where they don't explicitly say something one way or the other, and
Yeah.
but they have to. There has to be some sort of payoff. But anyway,
Yeah.
um, so let me lay out my predictions, and then
Okay.
you can lay out any predictions you have.
I,
Okay.
I, I don't have too many
Well,
actually. So go
okay.
ahead. Feel free to.
I predict, and I could be wrong. I'm ready to be wrong. Um, I think that uh, Keemer will be a knight of Ren, if not Ren.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, and because they could be an offshoot. They're not an offshoot, but maybe like uh
Darksiders.
Darksiders, but like they like they revere the Sith, the legends of the Sith and
That's
stuff,
true, and
but
he
they don't
quotes the
even
Sith, the mantra or whatever.
right, but he doesn't even know that the Sith are still around. But so he doesn't get any Sith training
Yeah.
anyway. So I think there'll be Knights of Ren, or he'll be Ren, or whatever, and then I think Torben is the one that killed everybody. Now I don't know who controlled him. It could have been. Well, I guess it probably wouldn't be Keemer, depending on his age, but somebody controlled him to kill them or whatever.
Unless Keemer is older than we think, and maybe his human facade is just an illusion.
Ooh, maybe yeah.
Maybe he's a shapeshifter or something. Who knows? I mean, that would explain also if that is him in the
He
armor.
dissolves like when he dies. He dissolves just
Shang
like
Tsung.
no, not
Oh,
he reverts back to what's her face in Attack of the Clones, the
oh
changeling.
God, Zam Wesell,
Zam Wesell. He turns into that stupid bug-looking
Claudite. Yeah.
alien. Yeah, that would be that would be funny. Um,
Someone's
uh,
gonna shoot him with a Camino
and
Kyber dart.
And so I think that the Ren thing will take care of a lot of issues. I think also, I don't know that I have a prediction though about Osha and May and their origin. Um,
I don't either, but it's funny how the show is the Acolyte, and then there's the whole thing about dual realities. It's in the O of the title, how it's like double O
yeah,
on the Acolyte, and
right.
then of course the two. And I think this is going to tie into the Sith rule of two somehow, or at least hint that it could be
Yeah,
some aspect
I
of that.
I would like it to be something else, but I have a feeling they're going to be a dyad or dryad, whatever the hell it is, dyad. And they created them with the Force. I think that it'll be that, and that won't necessarily one way or the other have any bearing on the prophecy. I don't think they'll tackle that or anything. They won't mention it. That's just going to be a thing. So they won't be a virgins like Anakin. They will
Yeah,
not have been created by the Force. They will have been created by the witches manipulating the
yeah,
midichlorians and the Force to create them. They
that seems to be the way it's going.
it's interesting because they haven't said midichlorians, but they
I
have
don't think anyone wants to say that
no
word
no,
since
but they did
1999.
acknowledge that they're a thing because they test OSHA, they take her blood.
Oh yeah, for sure,
So
for sure.
so they
It's just
do
like, well, I can't say anything about the Bad Batch because you haven't watched it yet, but
right. Yeah, I know.
that's
I need
another
to
show
I need
that
to
has been saying midichlorians without saying
right.
midichlorians.
Um so I think I would really like that though if they like really leaned into it and they just like yeah fucking midichlorians, we manipulated the midichlorians and we used the midichlorians to create you guys and don't
It's
even
leaning into the Phantom Menace generation that has never given a shit about
right.
midichlorians and had no preconception prior to that movie. It's vindicating them as
Yeah,
fans
so
in a certain way.
I will say this isn't a prediction, this is a statement. If they go that route, they don't even say that they manipulated the Force or they manipulated the midichlorians to create them, but if they just say we manipulated the midichlorians and used the midichlorians to merge or whatever to fertilize and create you two, I will say it's an excellent show. 2 thumbs up, 5 stars. I'll just say right now, it'll be good.
Okay.
In,
Okay.
in
Wow.
spite of everything else, if they go that route, just
But
to,
there's no white men, Jason, in the show
I
other
don't
than those
care.
criminals.
Just
Okay,
to
all
piss everyone off. I am so contrarian. That is as far as I go.
right. You're
In my
contrarian to the contrarians.
right, just to piss off the haters. And it's funny because I lean that way on a lot of stuff, but man, that would like make people's heads explode. That's
Oh,
why
it would.
that is actually kind of why I like midichlorians, because I didn't like them at first, but then I grew to accept them because I'm like, what,
Yes, me too.
George just wanted an explanation, a mechanical explanation for this stuff, and
That's it. That's all it was meant to be to George. I think it was just
right.
it was kind of like I'm going to explain God using science because if the Force is God, this is just another view. It's just another view,
Right.
and that's it. Midichlorians never needed to be this big gigantic problem that some fans had. It's just
No, they took everything too little. They took it as gospel and truth versus
yeah,
it's what the Jedi think is happening.
exactly.
Because like we talked about a lot 20 years ago, we talked about, or 25 years ago, when all this stuff went down, it's like, well, it's possible that the Jedi are wrong, and it's not the midichlorians are a byproduct, not a they're just an indicator and a byproduct of one's connection to the Force versus
Right, right.
them being the ones that cause the Force. The Jedi could just be wrong about that, you
Yeah,
know?
and to me, it kind of slightly tied into things like in the Jedi Academy trilogy when they find that kind of little device that can
Yes.
sense the Force in people.
Right.
And to me, that was just like, oh, that device is reading
Right.
midichlorians. That,
Yeah.
but they did, Kevin Janderson didn't know
But
that or
that's the thing.
think that back
There
then.
would
But
be no other there would be no other way. That all the midichlorians was a way to convey that like Anakin is the most powerful. Because otherwise you just have Qui-Gon going
exactly,
like, oh my god, I can sense he's so powerful. He's more powerful
yes,
than Yoda.
they
It's like, well, how
needed
do
a
you know?
reason to prove to the Council and
Right.
Yoda. You're right.
So
That's exactly it.
so in light of all that, never really bothered me that much. It did at first, but at this point it doesn't. And if it would bother a lot of other people, that would be great to me.
Yeah, that's always
So
the high point of life.
so
Is
anyway,
if you
that's
can
those are my predictions,
piss
and my
people
one
off.
statement is if they use the midichlorians to create them, not the
I
Force, but
like
the
this.
midichlorians,
Yeah.
and they say
Well,
it, they got to say it.
we will see. I think one of my few theories I'll throw out here is that I think tonight's episode is going to be a flashback, but I could be wrong.
I don't think
I was
so.
just
Oh,
thinking. I was
my
just thinking. This got this big attack, ends on a cliffhanger.
I
Surely
predict.
that's not going to be continued the next week.
No, we talked about this a few days ago. Tonight's episode is directed by the same person that directed last week's episode, Alex Garcia Lopez. So
Okay.
it's a direct
Which would
continuation.
imply it's a
It's a direct
continuation.
continuation. I predict that the next flashback episode will be episode 7 because that's directed by Kagunada, who directed episode
The other
3,
flashback
the other
episode.
the flashback episode.
Which the flashback episode was the one to not use the transitions, wipes, and dissolves, the
Right.
classic Star Wars. Which, by the way, let's mention that briefly. That really gives it the flavor of the movies a
Mhm.
lot. They're very good and used tastefully,
Yes.
and coupled with the fact that the soundtrack is excellent.
Yes.
I don't think it's like mind blowing, but it's about nearly on par with Gordy Hobb and his Jedi Survivor Fallen Order Battlefront soundtracks.
It is.
in that it emulates Williams very well.
Yes, I know that I kind of poo-pooed the whole seeing witches thing and it turning into the soundtrack. Aside from that, it is as good as I could ever hope for from a show or a movie even.
Yeah.
Like it feels
So
really good.
but even though the show is a little bit smaller on the sets and the design and this and that, the visuals, the transitions, and the music, I get the feeling I do when I at least watch the sequel trilogy, where this is the classic Star Wars kind of framework, which helps some things wash down a little better. It's a comfort thing where it's just like, oh, this is Star Wars. Because sometimes, like with the other series, they were purposely pulling away from that, and it's like, oh, here's Mando with its synthwave soundtrack,
Yeah.
which is okay, it's fine, but that doesn't always make me feel like I'm watching Star Wars. It feels like Blade Runner sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, it's just nice to have little bit of something to help everything, all the medicine wash down.
So
Anyway,
that's all I
I
have to say about that.
all right, Forrest Gump. I think I'm good too. We will do another podcast episode likely when the series finishes, which I think is mid-July, second or third week of July, I think.
Yes.
So we got another month or so. Anyway, yeah, that was fun, and yeah, stay tuned to the channel. We will have our continuation of Jedi Outcast videos. They are
yeah,
coming.
we finally finished it. I forgot to
We
even mention that
finished
at the beginning
start.
of the show.
Well, you know, we cranked out about one episode per month the last 6 months or whatever, 5 months, and so we were able to wrap it up. I mean, we had to replay it. Yes, it did. But anyway, those are coming. I'm going to be, you know, putting together the thumbnails and all that, and cleaning them up and putting them out. So keep an eye on the YouTube channel, Star Wars Unfiltered, and yeah. Otherwise, you know, check us out on Instagram. Follow our page there. And we'll catch everybody on the next episode. May the Force be with you.
Good night.
All right, here's a joke. Why does Leia wear buns on her head?
Why?
In case she gets hungry in a Senate meeting.
Oh, God damn it.
He walked right into that one.